and welcome to We the Students, a political discussion sponsored by Nauset Regional High School's AP US Government and Politics program, in collaboration with Nauset's video production class. A little more than 1 month ago, 17 people, mostly teenage students, were murdered in a mass shooting at Marjory Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland, Florida. And once again, our national conversation turned to guns, school safety, mental illness, and what we as a society can do to stop these kinds of mass killings in the nation's schools. One suggestion made to combat school shootings is to allow teachers to carry concealed weapons. Already, a number of states allow trained school personnel to carry guns on school property. Should teachers be allowed to carry guns in school? That's the topic of our discussion over the next 30 minutes. I am your guest host, Elena O'Connor, a senior here at Nauset and veteran of the AP Government program. Just for the record, opinions expressed here belong to the panelists and are not the views of Nauset Regional High School or the Nauset Regional School District. At the bottom of your screen, you'll see a special email address for our panel today. Please feel free to email us your thoughts and suggestions about today's topic so we can continue this discussion in our government classroom. Now, let's meet our panel. For teachers carrying guns, we have Kara Moore, Patricia Lord, Rebecca Prenga, and against it, we have Shana McCarthy, Shannon McSorley, and Gwen Grant. To start, I'm going to ask the against side, why don't you think it's a good idea for teachers to carry guns in schools?
Arming teachers is not a good idea because the purpose of it puts an unfair burden on teachers. They're just simply not trained to use firearms, and guns in the classroom would hurt the learning environment. When tragedy strikes and a live shooting is occurring, having armed teachers would not help.
I don't think it's an unfair burden if they volunteer to carry guns.
Yeah, no one is requiring teachers to carry guns. It would all be volunteers.
Except Donald Trump suggested that there would be a bonus for teachers who would carry guns, and if there was a bonus, teachers who were unqualified and with the wrong intentions might want to be armed.
Why would someone become a teacher if they would have wrong intentions against students?
They want to be a teacher because they want to teach students, and that's their job. They want to inspire them and support them and educate them, and they don't want to have to, having a gun or being trained to use a gun isn't part of being a teacher, and I don't think it should be having to be part of being a teacher, especially if it came to killing one of their students. I just really don't think that's their place or something they should ever be put in that situation.
It would still be a choice, and I don't think people who would go crazy, I don't think that would happen, because there's a lot of background checks to get an LTC and a bunch of qualifications to carry a firearm.
But once the teacher does have it, the responsibility of protecting the students does fall on them. Whether they are in an active situation, they fire a gun, or they don't, if a student dies, it's still on them because it was their job to help protect the students.
They would only protect the students if the police haven't gotten there yet. It would only be a last resort situation.
That's not what I've heard. From most of the arguments for this, I've heard that it's an instant situation, that police take too long to get there, and then it's the teacher's job to react right away.
Yeah.
Police already have a difficult time shooting moving targets with a 17 to 48% accuracy during school shootings when they respond. So how does that make teachers who are even less qualified to shoot a gun, even if they've had training, to stop a gunman?
Again, it's only a last, if the police aren't there and they see an imminent threat, then they're probably going to try to stop. But if the police are there and the threat's not that bad, then they're not going to have the responsibility. They're going to get out.
But the thing is, you don't know how they're going to react in that type of high adrenaline, and obviously dangerous situation. You don't know what they're going to see as a threat, and I just don't think it's a good idea, because they're not, obviously there would be training, but that's not their job, and they're not trained for those type of situations like police officers are. So I really just do not think it's their place.
I think it's good for them to at least have an option. They wouldn't have to. No one's saying they would have to, but if they would have an option to use a weapon instead of just being there and sitting in a corner or just having no other.
But then if they didn't use the weapon, then everyone would blame them. If you don't use the weapon and you have the weapon, then the responsibility falls on the teachers who had the guns, and people might blame them for not obtaining the shooter.
There's also the option of non-lethal bullets. They have them, and if there's an option for the teachers to carry non-lethal weapons.
But that's not, we're debating if teachers should have guns with like a lethal weapon.
Will it just be guns? You're saying like lethal, like not lethal bullets.
Yeah.
So how much training do you think the teachers should be required to have? And I know Trump's talked about the bonuses and the idea of federal funds. Do you think federal funds, federal money should be used to train teachers?
Well, I found in an article that teachers have to pass more qualifications and have to shoot better than many police officers and how they're trained. So they would be able to, as you said before, it's hard for police officers to shoot a moving target, but if teachers are trained to fire better than a police officer, then they would be more qualified.
But how can you possibly train a police officer to shoot better, to train a teacher to shoot better than a police officer? For a police officer, their job is to patrol, and for a teacher, their job is to teach.
But police officers have to do their job every day. Teachers, you wouldn't necessarily, like, there's a chance that it would happen, but there isn't a huge chance it would happen. So they probably don't need as much as, but they would still, some programs would offer like over 100 hours of training, but they don't need to be trained as much, like as often as police officers, because they're not doing their job every day like that.
I know a school in Texas, they have guns in school, and the teachers have to get 90% accuracy to be able to have an LTC.
But it's not 90% accuracy in a school shooting situation. You really don't know how they're going to react in that situation, and nothing can prepare you for that. I just don't think, and teachers really are not going to be, not that there obviously could be a scenario where one is prepared and it's best case scenario, but I don't think you can say that anything will prepare teachers that they're going to be well trained enough for this situation, especially that their job is to educate students, not to carry a gun.
When we talk about the training, we have to ask if it's going to be a national coverage or if it's just going to be by state. There is a bill in Alabama waiting to be passed about if teachers and administrators would be able to carry guns. The bill as of right now is only requiring 40 hours of training. That's less than it takes to drive a car. Don't you think it should be a lot more?
It should definitely be higher, and I also think it should probably be a national thing, and it should be a lot higher than 40 hours. That's not enough time.
All right. So we talked about the accuracy rates and the situation of being in a school shooting. So do you guys think arming teachers actually creates a safer environment for kids, or is it the illusion of safety and that having that firearm might make some people more comfortable?
Arming a teacher would hurt the learning environment because especially if it's a concealed weapon, because you don't know which teachers have the guns. So it would create a barrier between the students and the teachers. And it might be harder for students to go and talk to their teachers or have better relationships with them.
I would say it's the opposite, because if you don't know that the teacher has a gun, then you wouldn't necessarily assume that.
Then you might assume that every teacher has a gun.
And some teachers or some students feel safer knowing that there are teachers in their school
They
that have
feel
guns.
safer, but you don't know if they actually are safer. Having more guns around students, I don't think makes them safer at all. I think it does exactly the opposite, especially with possible accidents that could happen from it. I just don't think the pros to them having it. Obviously there are, and there could be a best case scenario, but all the negatives to it and possible things that could happen and go wrong just really outweigh all the good things that could possibly happen.
But obviously, you go.
I think if there's more guns, then it could be like a deterrent from the school shooter actually coming to that school, because most schools only have 1 or 2 SROs, and they only have 1 gun each. But if a school shooter knew that the school had armed teachers, then they wouldn't be likely to come to that school.
I think a deranged, mentally insane person who's going to shoot up a school and kill kids isn't going to care if they think there might be more guns there most of the time, or sometimes they end up killing themselves. So I really don't think they're going to say, oh, just because there's a possibility I could get shot, I'm not going to go.
Well, actually, 98% of shootings happen in gun-free zones. It's only 2% that don't happen.
But how many school zones have guns? That's not a plausible statistic because you can't compare it. There's so many schools without guns, and there's only a couple schools with guns.
It's so far it has. There's one in Texas, and it has so far worked. I called them, and they said it was pretty good.
And most criminals are going to target the gun-free schools versus schools that they know have armed teachers.
But more guns just create more violence because, especially if an accident happens, like a gun could fall out of a teacher's holster, or they might not have cared for it properly, and a mentally ill student or even a teacher who was not fit could possibly steal the gun and do something with it. So you don't even have to go off campus to obtain a gun, possibly.
You don't have to do one now. We have SROs. They have guns too.
Well,
SROs
they-
are better trained.
Yeah.
Yeah, but no. If a crazy person really wanted a gun, they would probably, if they wanted to, they could try if they really wanted to.
Well, if there's teachers with guns, that just means more guns, more weaker teachers for them to attack than a trained SRO.
But they wouldn't know necessarily which teachers to attack, so they could
Right.
just
They-
attack a teacher and then have nothing on them.
They could find out. They could see it.
And there a lot of so they're carried usually in lock containers or in their belts, and they would easily be able to feel like, and they would be trained to get their hands on the gun before any student would be able to get control of the gun.
They're trained to do that, but that's only the best case scenario.
Yeah, but the best case scenario wouldn't have a shooter in the school. Like you're saying, they should just be there to teach, but what happens if someone comes? Like, what is the response going to be? Wait for the police? Because most of the time, the police don't, like, they'll take a longer time to get there. Sometimes the shooting will be over before the police can even make it.
Well, that's why we're going through ALICE training. That's why we have SROs. We already have plans in place better than the lockdowns that we used to do, and we're still improving, but giving teachers guns just might radicalize it more than it needs to be.
But we only have one SRO for this entire school, and since it's an outdoor campus, she won't be able to get to all of the buildings at once if she doesn't know where the school shooter is.
Well, what if all the teachers, not a lot of teachers here would accept a gun. What if they're all just on one end of the campus?
And that's their choice. You don't have to be forced to carry a gun.
And then the
Well, they-
SRO can go on the other side of the campus.
Yeah.
What if they're
But the SRO can't always stay on one side of the campus.
I know, but I'm just saying that if Gwen says that all the teachers would be on one side of the campus, the SRO can spend more of her time on the other side where it's less protected by the teachers that would have the guns.
So it's better to have just a bunch of well qualified people just
They
with
would
guns
be
all over the
well
school.
They
qualified.
would be qualified.
Their job as a teacher that they sign up and went to school for, that means they're qualified to have a
No,
gun.
they wouldn't. They'd have to go through extra qualifications. We're not saying every teacher should have a gun.
But
So how much training exactly? Like, what do you think the training process should be for a teacher who wants to carry a gun on campus?
Well, I know to get an LTC, there were you have to get complete a firearms safety course, and you have to go through all these different qualifications. Like you have to get personal references, and you have to fill out a really extensive form, and you have to, if you have a restraining order, that also applies. You can't have a gun if you have a restraining order.
All right, and so clearly you guys are against this idea of teachers carrying guns in schools, which is one of the solutions that has been brought up. But so what are some other alternatives for a solution to gun violence, which is a growing problem in our country, that you think would work better?
while we're on the topic, if schools really feel that guns are the way to go, they want to hire more SO officers, more police officers, more actual security, people whose whole careers revolve around protection of students.
But how would you pay for that?
Yeah,
How are you going to pay for teachers to have guns?
they
At-
would pay, right?
At the Clarksville School District, hiring one school resource officer would have cost them $50,000 a year, but to hire 13 staff members, it was only $68,000.
68 is greater than...
Yes, but that was 13 versus 1.
It costs more because you're getting a person that's trained in it.
Yeah, but you still have more options around the school. Like you were saying, if everybody's in one building, if there's 13 teachers, there's probably a better chance that they're not all in the same spot.
But they're just not that level of qualified that they need to be. Even people, even those with the most qualifications you can get, there's no guarantee that they're going to be ready for this.
But there's also no guarantee that the SRO is ready for
But
it.
they're better ready.
But there's not a guarantee.
But
There's
it's
never a guarantee.
better.
That's-
Exactly.
But there's no guarantee for the teachers, and it's even less so.
Yeah. The
Well,
tea-
if even police officers in that type of situation, like at the Parkland shooting, one of the officers didn't even go into the school.
Exactly.
If police officers who sign up and that's their job can't even do that, how are we going to say teachers are going to want to go and be ready and take out their gun to shoot people? Like, you just really cannot count on them, and it should just not be placed on them as their job to
If
do
there are
that.
teachers there who are willing to die for their students, then wouldn't it be better to have them armed than to just have them have to like stand in front?
The accuracy, they could have hurt other students that were around them.
But people are going to be hurt either way.
There might, they still could hurt more people. It's not. You don't want the teachers to be harming others. You don't want any harm whatsoever.
But if there's a chance that they do hit the shooter, they could stop countless deaths.
But they could also hit a student, and then everything's falling on them. If they didn't have a gun in the first place, that student wouldn't be dead.
But that student
But
might have
then-
been dead anyways.
They would have been shot anyways by the school shooter.
But think about the backlash that would happen if a teacher accidentally shot a kid. Think of what would happen if it like accidentally discharged. There was a teacher in a North Georgia high school, I think kind of recently in Delton High. He got access to a gun. He wouldn't let students into his classroom during a planning period, and when the principal tried to unlock, he just shot out the window to scare people away. I think if they're capable of doing this as like a scare tactic, they obviously don't take it seriously enough.
Well, hopefully we're going through more background checks and seeing who is like more capable of being able to do this and who has problems that would.
I think you're right that there should be more background checks and there should be more regulations on guns everywhere, but I don't think making there be more guns in schools and giving more people guns is going to solve anything. Like, not that it's what we're debating, but the real issue is gun regulations, and that's a big step that needs to be done, not giving guns to our teachers.
Under Trump's new regulation, it is easier than ever for anyone to get a gun. He signed a bill back at the beginning of his term making it easier for mentally ill people to buy guns. It was just recently raised in some places from 18 to 21. People can get these guns illegally. It's just so easy. We register cars more strictly than we register guns.
And because it's so easy for them to get guns, there's been more frequent school shootings, and we need an answer. And the answer, just what do you think the answer should be?
I think obviously I can't say that we have to take away the public's guns. That's the Second Amendment, right?
And that's not ever going to happen because the criminals aren't going to hand in their
so
guns.
I'm trying not to say that, but obviously more guns leads to more gun violence. It's a really simple fact. Bringing more guns into the public to this amount with all these schools, I believe it was 37,000. To bring guns in just that amount at that speed, it would be absolute chaos.
Going off what Gwen said, on NBC there was a quote from Avery Gardner, and she said, "If having more guns in more places made Americans safer, then we would have the lowest rates of gun violence in any developed country in the world," and the exact opposite is true. So it's shown that we have the most guns, it's the easiest to get the guns, and we have the most school shootings in the world. So I don't think more guns is going to solve any problems that we have regarding gun violence.
I think we should have to do something. I know there was a quote from Theodore Roosevelt saying, the best thing you can do is the right thing, the second best thing is the wrong thing, and the worst thing you can do is nothing. So I feel like we should at least attempt something. It's not working, not having guns in school. There's been increased school shootings, so I think we should try to do something.
Well, I agree that more SO officers should be available, but giving these untrained teachers guns,
But they
that-
would be trained.
not enough.
So, as students yourselves, what do you think the effect of having guns in the classroom will be on the learning environment? And how would you feel if your teachers were carrying guns?
I don't think it would change the learning environment, especially if it's a concealed weapon, because you won't know what teacher has the gun.
I think that it would create a humongous barrier between students and teachers because the teachers, you would feel more that they were more violent and they were more scary, and that's just my personal opinion. I would never want teachers to have guns in their classrooms.
But other students will feel safer knowing that there's another option. If something happens, there's somebody there that has a chance to protect them.
Yeah, but if there's just some students that feel safer, a whole majority may feel much less safe.
And a majority of teachers don't want to carry guns.
They wouldn't have to.
They have to volunteer if they want to carry a gun.
Well, they might not want their other staff members to carry them either. They might not feel safe. How would you feel like walking into work just knowing someone you like beat a promotion for, someone you don't trust, they're legally allowed to carry a weapon that could kill you within seconds?
So what kind of guns do you think teachers should be allowed to carry? What's the extent of the firearms that should be allowed?
Oh, I think they would be semi-automatic handguns like the police have, where it'd be kept locked away, and they'd probably have safety locks and lock holsters. Yeah.
Well, if they're locked away, how is the teacher going to get to it that fast in the brink of an emergency?
It would still be faster than in like rural areas. It takes a long time for the police officers to get to the school. So even if the teacher had to go into like a locked safe, they'd be able to do it more like quicker than a police officer getting there.
And would they have to carry around this locked safe with them everywhere they
It
go?
would be in their room.
So they just leave a gun unattended?
It would be
It would be
locked
locked.
up.
It's
Guns
not the
are
best
locked up
security.
at people's homes, and accidents happen all the time when people have guns at home, and it makes it more likely if people have a gun in their home for them to be killed. So I don't know how it's going to be any different in schools that having guns is going to make you less likely to be killed by a gun.
And if we rely on a teacher to protect a classroom, if a shooter comes in knowing well aware that teachers have guns, the first reaction is going to be to shoot the person they know who has the gun. Right after the resource officer, the teachers are the first ones to get hit. If we rely on that teacher to protect the classroom, the shooter's going to know that. They're going to go straight for the teacher.
But the
and the whole
shooter's going to
classroom's just
attack
gonna
the
be
teacher
unattended.
anyways.
But then it's
It'll happen whether or not they have a gun. If you were a shooter, you'd probably go for the adult.
If it'll happen whether or not they have a gun, then what's the point of them having guns?
If they have a gun, they can protect themselves.
Kara mentioned it earlier, but I want to ask you guys, do you think there's any validity to the idea that arming teachers would deter potential shooters?
no. If I have a quote from Mark Brandon, a man who lost his son in a 2012 shooting. He said a deranged psychopath on his way to commit an act of murder in a school, knowing the outcome is going to be suicide, is not going to care if there's somebody with a gun. That's their plan anyway. I agree with that. I think if someone's coming in, they know the police are going to show up, they know there's probably going to be an SO officer on campus, they know there's going to be someone firing back. They know they're going to die anyway. What's stopping them right now? There's not much. Just adding more guns, plain and simple, just adds more guns.
And that is true, but like Patricia said, most mass shootings have been taking place in places where citizens are banned from carrying guns. So there definitely is an effect on not being allowed to have guns somewhere and that being a potential target.
Like I said before, there's majority of teachers are not allowed to have guns currently. So that statistic just doesn't make sense because we can't compare it. Like it's not like, so there hasn't been violence in those specific places since there have been guns, but you can't have violence everywhere. You can't just be waiting to have it just to show that it doesn't work.
All right. What do you guys think for for some other solutions, like not glorifying shooters and saying their names as much on TV, or mental health background checks, things like that? What do you think would be the most effective way to help with school shootings other than giving teachers guns?
I definitely think that we should upgrade the way that we proceed with lockdowns, and currently we have just come up with Alice, which is better than the last lockdowns because now people are trained to evacuate and even to fight back, which changes the dynamic, or to barricade, and that's one way, but guns just aren't the answer.
I also think like gun regulations can do a lot in other safety precautions, and obviously any situation or any way we're gonna try to solve this problem is going to require money regardless of what we do. So there's ways we can put money into more counseling for anyone we think is like mentally ill, and other ways at school to prevent this, but I just do not believe that guns are the answer to keeping kids from getting killed by guns.
The best way to prevent a shooter is to take them down before they get into school, before they can cause that harm. I think what we need to do is amp up security at the entrances. I know we have an outdoor campus, and it's harder.
It would not work here because there's so many entrances.
That's why I think we need more qualified people. Like, remember, I think it was last year, we had that clown threat near Halloween. There were dozens of police officers just waiting in squad cars protecting all the entrances.
And if we really wanted a safer school, we could build a safer school to be safer.
But we're not building a safer school.
Why couldn't you if that was your priority?
If student safety was our priority, then we would build a new school and we would have better entrances and we would put more money into that.
So are you saying that the student safety isn't a priority right now?
The student safety is always a priority, but if we wanted to continue on that, we could do more things than arming teachers.
And also, like you said back when we were changing the lockdown drills, now we're teaching people to fight back. Would it be better to just throw whatever random object in the classroom, or to have a gun that could potentially end it right there?
But if
Potentially.
students are going through the Alice training, the first thing they're going to do, if it's in the right situation, is they're going to go straight for the shooter, try to knock them down. And if a teacher's standing back there with a gun, they had to get out of a safe, and they fire, what's stopping them from hitting a student?
But if the students aren't like running up and attacking, if they just come in and the teacher has the gun right there and is able to do it that fast.
I think you're talking about the best case scenario, and obviously that'd be great if that could be guaranteed every time, but I think all the possible negatives that could happen just really outweigh the best possible scenario, and I really think that's unlikely, although it is possible that it could happen. There's just so many other like things that could happen, like negatively, and accidents, and just changing like the environment of students and teachers at school. I just don't think that the best case scenario is what you can base your argument off of.
And another thing that we've been talking about with Alice is that there's a lot of different scenarios, and this would just be another option. This wouldn't necessarily always be the option, but it would just be another option, another way that people could be safer.
But it's too much of a risk. Like, there could always be that like plan. One student comes in with a gun, and when the teacher's evacuating, another student grabs a gun that the teacher had. There's always
too much
a
risk. Like, there's going to be a risk
But
regardless.
adding more guns just makes more guns available to add to the gun violence.
But guns can stop it too. I think you're not really.
What would you
bringing that
say
up.
to students that feel, like I personally would feel a lot more unsafe if there were more guns at school and my teachers had them? Are you going to tell all the students that would feel unsafe that their teachers are going to have guns whether they have a choice or not?
Yeah, but how do you really feel safe just knowing that like somebody could come in, and what are you going to do? Like, yes, we
I feel safer knowing it couldn't be one of my teachers, or another student in my school couldn't way more easily access a gun without having to even go off campus to get one.
I agree with Shannon. I would feel so unsafe if a teacher had a gun, especially teachers that, a teacher that potentially scares you, or a teacher that you don't have a good relationship with. That's just horrifying.
But concealed carriers are among the most law-abiding individuals in the country and are 8 less likely to commit a crime than the average citizen. So
Well-
your average teacher is already more likely to commit a crime.
Well, that might be true. We do trust police officers, but the police brutality rate among minorities is so high. So many kids just get shot for doing nothing because police get that fear factor, because they're scared, because they think a student might be doing something wrong. And if they just pull out, if a police officer will do something like that, what's stopping a teacher who's less calm, who is freaking out on the student for misbehaving? We've seen it before. We've seen stuff like, we've seen teachers freak out. What's stopping them, like, not being stable, not worrying about the consequences.
We thank Nauset High School's television production class and Lower Cape TV for making this valuable experience possible for all of us. That concludes another segment of We the Students, a political discussion sponsored by Nauset Regional High School's AP US Government Politics program. I'm Elena O'Connor. Thanks for watching.